Hi, Lloyd. Good evening. Lloyd, do you mind unmuting and just saying something so I can see if I can hear you in here?
Sure thing. Testing one, two, three, four,
You're
five.
good. Thank you so much.
Of course. Nice to see you,
Good
Linda.
to see you
And
too.
yeah,
Glad you're able to join us for Venerable Robina.
hopefully I'll be there Friday, Saturday, but this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Of course. Hi, Hemant and Patty. Good evening, everyone in the Gampa. Glad to see you this evening. Venerable Robina should be arriving probably in just a couple minutes. Just a quick reminder, when Venerable Robina does come in, we are used to prostrating with with Geshe Gelik, but with Venerable Robina, we'll wait until she prostrates and then sits down, and then we'll prostrate. So just a little reminder. And for those of you on Zoom, looks like all of you have your cameras on now, but if you can keep your camera on, if at all possible, we do have video screens, and Venerable Robina does interact with folks on Zoom and likes to see everyone. So, you are part of the class just like everyone else here. And it helps if you have your video on. If you can't have it on for any reason, that's okay though. What? Hello, Venerable Robina has arrived.
Okay, okay. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Good. bit like the military, though, isn't it? You all lined up all very nicely. Okay. See what Buddha, let's talk about what Buddha tells us, okay? The Four Noble Truths or something, is it? Is that the plan, Linda? So I do a little prayer first. We set ourselves in the right direction. The Lamas always say, state our motivation. We might say, state our purpose. It's really what it means, actually. In other words, why are we sitting here? So we think we're sitting here to listen to these words coming from the Buddha. I'm listening too, I promise. So we can listen to it as advice. And if we choose, we put it into practice. And what is the advice? It's to develop the two wings of the bird. Put yourself together so you can help others, basically. And that really covers the entire path to enlightenment. So very much the Four Noble Truths. It's that. Well, not quite, actually. It's really, this is more the wisdom wing. The Hinayana component of the teaching that we share with the Hinayana path. The teachings in the first two scopes of the Lam Rim. So we're listening to take some tools from it so we can develop our amazing potential. And then eventually add bodhicitta to the mix so we can become a Buddha. Think like that, okay? We'll sing our little prayer that states that. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chernyen gi pe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chernyen gi pe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyabsu chi Dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Well, so the Four Noble Truths, I think, frankly, the truths aren't noble. I think it's the four truths for the noble ones. I think that's that. The noble ones are those who realize them, you know, who've experienced the truth of them. And maybe it's the four facts, you know, it's the four facts. Four facts for the noble ones. Facts about life. So to remind us, it's so incredibly important. We have to do this in our culture because we've come from a framework of religious philosophy coming from a creator. There's no, when you know, I don't know what the Tibetans thought when the Indians came along, when Guru Rinpoche flew into Tibet with the Dharma in his mind and started presenting it. I don't know what views they had there, but now, because it's been in Tibet, what, 1500, 17, what is it? Since 700. 7 to 1720, it's 1300 years. So the view of karma, and before that, karma, for example, the view of karma was in India, completely entrenched, you know. So these views coming from that tradition were totally their worldview. When we hear them, we just then think, when we hear all these views, we just think, oh, another lot of, you know, do this and do that, and if you're naughty, you'll get punished. That's the framework we have very strongly in our minds. So it's so important to always remind us, where do these teachings come from? I always say this one lately. Many times, I might have said it last night. I can't remember. I know I said it in prison. We went to prison yesterday. I think I mentioned this, yes. And it's a really good point. This man who happened to be a scientist, he said, who revealed the teachings of the Buddha? Did I mention this last night? I said, no. It's a really major point. It's huge, actually. And we got to think about this very clearly, you know. Where did this information come from? This is enormously important. Well, it didn't come from, you know, so I said, like I told you, who revealed? He said, who revealed the teachings? That's a really powerful concept. And of course you'd ask that, because that's our assumption of religious philosophy. It's revelation from on high. It's not it's no way is it what's called natural law. I mean, Mr. Galileo and that mob way back then, you know, they're the ones who started looking into natural law. I mean, he practically got burned at the stake, didn't he, for daring to argue with the prevailing dogma, which is the truth. So then suddenly now we have what we call science, you know, and religion is like on the lowest on the totem pole, isn't it? And we know the concept of science is, you know, coming from the concept of believing in what God says. And I'm not finding fault with that, but that's how science has come. But what's interesting, by the way, we think we invented the concept of materialism. I mean, in the Indians, well before the Buddha, there's incredible different views all existing, and one of them was a view of materialism. So it's nothing new. Even though we smarty pants Westerners think we invented it all, and everyone else is stupid. I mean, His Holiness says it was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Well, we thought it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. I mean, how rude, Do you understand? I'm serious. 3,000 years ago. I mean, this blows our minds. We don't believe that, No, it's not possible. It's really, and it's only really now since His Holiness has been in the West for 30, 40, 50 years, and there are all these discussions with modern thinkers, that this is now becoming evident to modern thinkers, They begin to respect this incredible knowledge, The psychologists too. So you can argue that every word that is valid Buddhism, and I mentioned this yesterday, valid meaning it's coming authentically from the lineage of holy beings back to the Buddha, not just some dude who goes on a weekend, has a trip and writes a book and says it's Buddhist. Or I'm going to believe this, Imagine writing a cake book like that. Imagine coming up with a few recipes and deciding you'd like this recipe and writing a book. I mean, we would never do it. We'd be so rude. So it's really important that if it is a valid Buddhist teaching, it's not something to be believed in itself. That is bizarre. There's nothing in the Buddhist view, including the most simple teaching that's evident to anybody with half a brain, that things change, all the way to the most subtle teachings about emptiness, all the way to the seemingly most esoteric teachings in the Vajrayana. There's not a single tiny atom of any of that information that is something made up that has no basis in reality. That's mental illness for the Buddha, We have to remember that. It's not a question of believing. Buddha says not to believe a single word he's saying. You take it, you listen to it, you think about it, and you decide you're going to look into it. And that's any information. Even just 1 + 1 is 2. When you first heard it, you had never heard such a concept. Oh, wow, Mum, I just heard that 1 + 1 is 2. Oh, wow. But she doesn't say, she doesn't go home and say, squeeze it into your mind and believe it. Yes, you'll memorize it, but eventually you have to experience the truth of it. And that's the point. So you started with taking it as your working hypothesis. Your teacher said to you, well, I'm presenting this to you. Don't just swallow it whole, but it's a hypothesis. You must listen to this and go home and think, well, if it were true that 1 + 1 is 2, you've got to think it through. And then you put all the things together, you join the dots, and then you get and then the penny drops, Every bit of information we've ever learned is like that. But as soon as it comes to religion, we become ridiculous, We love to have something that's mystical. We love, I mean, it's not being rude now, but I suppose I'm being rude. As soon as I say I'm not being rude, it means I'm about to be rude, I'll give you warning. I mean, I love my Catholic upbringing, right? Years ago in Berkeley, I think in California, I was talking to these Catholic nuns. It was a lovely meeting. And I like discussing these things, So I kept asking questions and they kept saying, oh, no, that's a mystery. I said, don't you want to know? Oh, no, they said. I'm not being rude. No, we want it to be a mystery and then we'll know about it when we get to heaven. I don't want any bloody mysteries. I want truth, please. Do you understand? And that can be the most esoteric, subtle thing in the universe. But this is the point about Buddha. This is not the Four Noble Truths yet. I'm jumping ahead. The nature of mind, consciousness, its function is to cognize. That's its job, the definition. Everything that exists, you have to give it a definition. And it's got to fit the definition. Then you can begin to discuss it. Well, what's the mind? First part tells you its conventional characteristics, that which is clear, not physical. And then the second part tells you its job. What's its job? To cognize, or to know, or to be aware. They are synonymous, right? That's the job of mind. And so you say to the Buddha, well, cognize what? He says, guess what, honey? That which exists. And he says, mind has that potential. And the trouble is now the mind is full of nonsense, deluded nonsense that's preventing us from cognizing, not only from preventing us from cognizing what does exist, but it's completely caught up in believing in things that don't exist. And this is why we suffer. In fact, that's one way of framing the entirety of Buddha's path. If you look at this word Buddha, I mentioned yesterday the word Sangye, the Tibetan equivalent. The etymology of the word is very delicious, Sang Bud, Sang implies, like I said, we know it's important, the eradication from your mind of all neuroses, all delusions, all misconceptions, all nonsense, all fears, all afflictions. This is a very shocking concept. And because it's not fitting with neuroscience and psychology, we then put it into the religious too hard basket. Oh, yeah, right. This is Buddha's reality. Mind has that potential. This is incredible that all this stuff is not at the core of our being. In other words, conceptual states of mind. I have to discuss this. It doesn't come quite in, it's sort of in the Four Noble Truths. I won't follow the typical thing. Is that all right? Can I just go rave on as usual? Thank you very much. I'll try and give some structure. So again, the point, if we're going to start hearing this stuff, we better know what he means by mind, and we better know who Buddha is and where the information came from. Otherwise, we're going to just think it's God on high and it's a belief system and then talk about the brain. Well, you'll be in real trouble if that's what you think, you know. So we're going to take this approach. Then we can begin to listen to it properly, you know how to deal with it. So Sang implies the eradication of all the not. That's what he's found, and that's where he diverged from the Hindus. He went through all this system. They'd already found how to remove. They'd already found how to stop the grossest level of suffering. They understood that. They've already discovered how to get rid of the second kind of suffering, which is the middle scope, which is all the delusions, which is the beginnings of the Four Noble Truths. But they hadn't discovered how to get rid of the subtlest level of suffering. We're going to get into those. There's 3 levels of suffering. And that's where Buddha diverged in his own direction, all in relation to the many views, but all in relation particularly to the subtlest one, the view of emptiness, you know, the final ultimate reality of things. So Gye implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind, virtue and goodness and wisdom. They are who we really are, you know. They are who we really are. They can't be removed from the mind. If you like, they're the substance of mind, if you like, a valid mind. And finally, a valid mind. This is what Buddha means. That's what it means. And Buddha's deal is that's what our potential is. I mean, this is very shocking. I always quote this story too. In Melbourne years ago in Australia, I was asked to give a talk at the Catholic University because one of the women there, we'd been to the same convent, you know. And they know I was a Catholic. So and I didn't know what to talk about. I was right there in the morning for my 20-minute little talk in this conference. I didn't know what to talk about. I couldn't work out what to talk about. So then I looked up the dictionary and I looked for the definition of God. 3 essential qualities: infinite wisdom, omniscience, infinite compassion, infinite power. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because that's the qualities of a Buddha. So the way I like to put this is always, the way I like to put it is that over the centuries, human beings, I mean, look at us, we should be so respectful, coming up with the meaning of life. How marvelous, you know, there's plenty of weird ideas, of course, and there's plenty of good ones. But all these, and I think many of them have come to see the same thing, but have come to different conclusions about them. Clearly, the Christians and the Buddhists, those qualities, yeah, but for the Christians, there's only one of them, and it's called God, and he's the boss, and he's the creator, and he runs this. I'm not being rude, it's okay. Having a boss, having a creator, nothing wrong, but Buddha disagrees. He's not just being argumentative, he's just not viable. Anyway, you don't need one. You don't need a creator. And it's a view and that view, you know, from the Christian teaching is that that's the energy of this being that pervades the universe, all knowing, all seeing, all compassionate, all wise, but runs the show and creates the universe, you know. So my talk was the similarities between the definition of God and Buddha. I'm not sure they liked it, but that was what I talked about, you understand. And I'm not being rude. I really have, I'm great respect for my upbringing and my Catholic upbringing, you know. So anyway, Sangye, this is the final potential. This is the Mahayana view. So the Four Noble Truths technically is the Hinayana view. You know, that's the first 2 scopes of the Lam Rim. It's all the teachings we share with the Hinayana path. It's all exactly the same teachings. You know. So our mind is the deal. Mind's job is to cognize, and Buddha has found finally on the Mahayana path, this is the one that mind can be omniscient, can be full of compassion when there's no longer delusions there. And so there's the infinite compassion, no longer a separate sense of I, to wish to benefit others. There's the wisdom to know how, and then there's the power to do so, you know. But also interesting difference. I remember in Kathmandu one time, some Lutheran people, very nice group, wanted to know about Buddhism, so I told them. And we're discussing the Bodhisattva path. how the whole, the whole plan was to become this being like a saint from their perspective, and then keep coming back again and again and again to help others. And one of the blokes said, "No way." He said, "No, I don't. That's horrible." He said, "I want to go to heaven with God." Nothing wrong. I'm just telling you. It was a very depressing idea to him. Coming back again and again, how awful. Anyway, that's the Mahayana component. So, okay, so this mind of ours has this amazing potential, but let's look at the way they present the Four Noble Truths, or the four facts for the Noble Ones. And really, a more upbeat way of putting it is okay. We all know that the whole four of these truths are all framed in terms of suffering, suffering. But if you want to feel a bit upbeat, you could say it's the four ways of how to get happy, because that's the opposite of stop suffering, isn't it? It's a method of how to get happy. That sounds more nice, doesn't it? How to stop suffering. And there's 3 levels. And this is a bit depressing part, isn't it? The first one. So the first of the 4 is there is suffering, and there are 3 levels. The second one is there are causes. The third one is, there is the potential to be free of those suffering and the causes. And 4, how to do it, the methodology. In that sense, it's simple in that way. Of course, it's presented in great detail and quite complex, but we'll try and keep it simple. I couldn't do it complex even if I tried. I haven't got enough information in my head. So the key one is, well, they're all important, but we've got to understand the first one. This is really crucial. And this is really crucial, especially if we want to go onto the compassion wing. If we want to go onto the bodhisattva path. In our culture, we love the idea of compassion. But unfortunately, we don't. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. The wisdom he's talking about is getting it from the Four Noble Truths, getting the nuts and bolts of the first and second scopes of the Lamb Rim down, understanding it for yourself. And crucially, understanding the 3 levels of suffering. So the first one, he calls it the suffering of suffering. It's like in-your-face suffering. So if we look at the second Noble Truth for a second and look at the causes, we'll go back a minute, but this is a very helpful way to see it. We know in the second Noble Truth, the causes of suffering. Everything is in relation to cause and effect. Everything that exists in the impermanent world is the product of causes, and there are hundreds of causes, we all know that, for things to come together. But here I just want to point out there are 2 main causes, and they're called karma. They're called karma and they're called delusions, okay? 2 main ones. The actions we've done in the past, and then what's in our mind, the neuroses in our mind, the causes of suffering. So if we look at that and we look at the delusions, because effectively the delusions, the neuroses in the mind, the 2, karma and delusions, subsume to 1. So the key thing the Buddha is saying is the main cause of suffering, and indeed the main cause of happiness, is what's in our mind. That's his thing. That's his expertise. So taking that view, we then see what is the main cause of suffering in the mind. It's called attachment. And that's the second scope. We'll get there in a minute. But I want to just take this as a reference point. So we go back to the first Noble Truth. You could say that the first kind of suffering, the suffering of suffering, is very simple. It's when attachment doesn't get what it wants. I'm not being mean. So in other words, when the bad things happen. So we know very well when bad things happen, that's what we mean by suffering, and it's a question of degree, we know that. And when good things happen, that's when we call it happiness. In the simplest way, we all understand that, and it's the same for the monkeys and the dogs, So this is when we look at this attachment, and we're going to discuss it in the second kind of suffering, that when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is when the bad things happen. It's either when you break your cup, you stub your toe, or you get tortured. There's a degree of it, isn't there? So that's what suffering means. Not in the broader sense of the 3 the realms of existence. That's the bigger picture. We can say that roughly. We're discussing here within the framework of this life. Of course, the bigger picture point of view, Buddha's view of the different realms of existence, because as far as he's concerned, there are trillions of minds, trillions of consciousnesses, trillions of sem-chens, mind possessors, and they're in this, and we all fit into this, what they call it, the 3 realms for a start. This is coming very much from the Hindus. So the top suburbs, so the 3 realms, there's the formless realm and the form realm, which are different levels of subtle mind as a result of accomplishing samadhi. We'll forget those. So the third one, the third realm, the desire realm, or the realm of attachment, there are 6 suburbs in there. And they're all from the perspective of the most intense, unbearable suffering. the hell realms, to the most intense bliss, the God realms. And they are all in reference to attachment. You could put it like that, and we'll go into this more. You could say it like that. So in our lives, the degree to which bad things happen, that's the degree to which we say we are suffering. And then if we have compassion for the world, the only people we have compassion for are people who are suffering. Andre doesn't go to visit rich people in their houses and have cups of tea and champagne for breakfast and gives them talks. He goes to the poor people in prison. Oh, they're suffering. I mean, get my point, isn't it? What do you mean I should go to the rich people's houses? They're not suffering, we'd say, because they don't have the gross level. So our usual view of suffering is when the bad things happen. And therefore, the only ones we have compassion for are when the bad things happen. So our view of compassion, therefore, is incredibly limited. So unless we've done the first and second scopes and the wisdom wing, we cannot have proper compassion. We're not qualified to go into the bodhisattva path. No way. The level of suffering that we learn about in the Four Noble Truths is the basis of the level of compassion we are capable of having, which includes everybody in the universe. That's not how we think. So compassion is not enough, as His Holiness says. You've got to have wisdom, and that means the nuts and bolts of the first and second scopes, the Hinayana stages of the path. That's very clear. So the first kind of suffering is when the bad things. So forget the realms of existence. We'll touch on this. But in this life, it's fairly obvious. When the bad things happen, we know that, and we know by definition what's called suffering is what we don't want. Well, certainly only the first kind. So that's the first kind of suffering. The broader one, or again, the realms, are those who are suffering in the intensely suffering realms of existence. See, I can't help talking here as well about how to try and get a sense of how these exist, because this is the biggest, the hardest one for us coming from a materialist perspective, and certainly coming from a Jewish or Christian perspective when we talk about one of those realms, isn't it? The only possibility is the hell realm. We don't talk about being born as a spirit or a ghost, and we don't talk about being born as an animal, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it? So for me, they don't talk again. Okay. I've only got 2 hours, isn't it? I've got to try and calm it down. Okay. Now, we'll forget the realms. Okay, we might go into those in a minute. We'll touch on it. Okay, so the suffering of suffering is when the bad things happen, when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And that sounds very mean and nasty to put it like that. But this truly is Buddha's definition. I mean, Buddha's view. In other words, if you were a bodhisattva who've gone beyond attachment and gone beyond delusions, you could argue they don't have suffering. Very clear. Therefore, they're not going to be unhappy. Not possible. You're only unhappy if you have suffering because you've got delusions. If you haven't got delusions, you wouldn't suffer. I mean, I remember Kirti Senchab Rinpoche said one time, I'll never forget it, one level or bodhisattva, whatever level they were at, I don't know. He said, for that bodhisattva, cutting off their hand and feeding a starving animal, that action is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. I'll never forget, But of course, that's demented. But it's logical when we understand the mind, when we understand what a delusion is and what a virtue is. And this is the middle scope, and we'll get there in a minute, which is the second kind of suffering. So the first kind of suffering is when bad things happen. So then the second kind of suffering is unfortunately what we, and this is literal, it's what we call happiness. It's what we call happiness. What we mean as happiness, which is getting what attachment wants, that's our view, that's the goal. But for the Buddha, it's a more nuanced, more subtle, more pervasive, more terrible level of suffering. This is very hard to hear. And it sounds so mean and nasty. I'm not even allowed to enjoy cake, we're thinking. But we've got to understand it. We have to get our head around it, technically, what it means, And the only way to understand what it means is by understanding the delusions, which is the main cause of suffering. So the third kind of suffering is called all-pervasive suffering. This is even more abstract for us. It's kind of like if you take, there's a simple way to put it, sort of. Well, put it this way, when you hear the solutions to them, then you can kind of understand what this suffering is. So the first kind of suffering, the solutions to the first kind of suffering is abiding by the laws of karma, which is the first scope. Stop harming others. Because the main cause of bad things happening to us is our harming others. In other words, doing actions that harm others, and that's by definition, a negative action by definition is an action you do with your body and speech that's driven by a deluded state of mind. That's the cause of our own future suffering of suffering. The second kind of suffering, the suffering of change, Buddha calls it, which is when the nice things happen. That's so you stop the first kind of suffering by stopping harming others. If you stop harming others, if you stop creating negative karma, you will stop having the first kind of suffering. You'll keep getting born in lovely human bodies looking divine and beautiful. You live to 97. Whatever you eat will make you healthy and fat. No one will harm you. You won't have ugly environments. You'll have a lovely, lovely life, life after life. And the cause of that is not harming others. It's very straightforward. That's how you stop the suffering of suffering. The second kind of suffering, to stop the suffering of change, which is the suffering that you get, which is the suffering of getting what you want and then it, grasping at the cake and believing the cake is the cause of happiness, and you keep eating it, waiting for suffering, waiting for happiness to come, and then what happens? Slowly you stop, you keep eating, and then it turns, and you look at it, it's so disgusting, you're going to vomit if you eat it again. So it changes from pleasant feeling to unpleasant feeling, which we'll have to discuss. So to stop that kind of suffering, you give up attachment, the second scope. You want to give up the third kind of suffering, you realize emptiness, and you're out of this whole damn thing altogether. So getting out of samsara altogether is caused by realizing emptiness, stopping stopping the suffering of change, getting rid of getting rid of attachment, the second scope, and the suffering of suffering. You stop harming others. That's how you stop the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering. Sorry, there's 3 levels of suffering, 3 levels of practice. That's why the Lamrim is so practical. It tells you exactly each step. Very clear, very logical. So the solution to stopping the suffering of suffering is to abide by the laws of karma, basically. And that's what we've got to remember where this comes from and what it means. I think it's the hardest one for us in our culture, frankly, because we just hear it as somebody telling us what to do again. Nothing's changed. And you go to hell if you're naughty, and you're sent there. You're sent there because you're naughty. That's how we think. There's a boss running the show, and we're naughty. So and the thing is, it's hard to hear it in any other way because our view of ego, the way we feel, we don't need our Christian mother, our Catholic mother, or our Jewish mother to tell us about these things, to get guilt. Guilt is a natural function of having ego grasping. Guilt is a natural function of having ignorance, So to how to hear karma it's a natural law. This is the key point to understand. It's a natural law. And that means no one invented it. A botanist doesn't invent botany. Things have been growing since beginningless time. And clever humans come along, use their noggin, observe the things that are growing, observe the thing in front of them, observe the earth, the water, the time, all the business, and put it together and codify a bunch of laws. It's always been there. Botany doesn't go to sleep when the botanist goes to bed. I've got to stop working now, wake up again and start growing flowers. That happens no matter whether you understand it or not. That's what natural law means. Whereas God's law is he runs it. That's our concept, which is really a conspiracy theory. If you're not being rude, but it's like there has to be somebody to run everything. And that's our view very strongly. We always think there's always someone behind everything, running it, making it all happen, Our mind goes like that. Natural law means things happen naturally. So clever people, a botanist has observed it. People have observed science. Well, Buddha has observed minds and beings and how things work in the universe and what happens and suffering is. That's his expertise. So he's saying basically all these trillions of sem-chens, mind possessors, every millisecond of what we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. It's the simplest way to put it. Those words we understand, but we don't think it is surprising to us. We do know our mind. Lama Zopa said one time, this is very shocking, and I'm quoting him exactly. The vast majority of all humans on the planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their life, that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives, meaning in their happiness and suffering. We know our mind, what goes on in our mind plays the main role if you're learning to be a cook or a carpenter or anything else. You have to squeeze your brain, learn a bunch of theories, and they're really important to learn properly. You can't just think that 1 + 1 is 3 because you feel like it. You learn the proper thoughts, then you can count, then you can play piano, then you can make a cake. So we know our mind plays the main role, is the main player in me turning myself into a carpenter. But when it comes to turning myself into a happy person, that's a brand new idea to us. We don't think our mind plays any role at all. We think it's all the outside world. That's how demented we are, you know, isn't it? So Buddha's saying, sorry, babe, we are the boss. That's why I like karma, I tell you. I'm sort of saying it as a joke all the time, but yeah. So when we begin to practice, abide by the laws of karma, which means realizing. So, okay, we have to understand. Let's look at it then, if that's the case. This natural law that Buddha and all the holy beings since the Buddha who followed his methodology have also seen to be true. Because the Dalai Lama says that we follow Buddha's methodology and we get to a point where he gets us where it isn't right that what he says, it's wrong, it doesn't happen, then he's wrong, so we reject him. So that's the rigor we need to use in our practice. So the law of karma is such, as I said, every millisecond of what we think and do and say produces the person we become. It's the best way to put it. So the next level of detail. The next level of detail is this. Everything that we do, say, and think that's labeled negative or non-virtuous will ripen as future suffering. Everything we think and do and say that's labeled virtuous will ripen as happiness. And this is very simple, but not simplistic, but simple. If you analyze your experiences in life, there are 3 kinds. Okay, let's just, when we study the mind, which we'll get to in the middle scope, you learn that there are 3 categories of states of mind. It doesn't quite say it so simply in low rig, but it's effectively that. There are those that are deluded, non-virtuous, ridiculous, disturbing, afflictions, and make you crazy and make you harm others. The second lot are virtuous, valid, reasonable, appropriate states of mind. But the third lot, they call them, often they say negative, positive, and neutral. And neutral sounds weird, but I prefer to call them the mechanics of the mind. So you think about this. So examples of the first kind, like attachment, anger, jealousy. Second kind, love, compassion, kindness. Third kind, concentration, good memory, discrimination. These are the nuts and bolts of the parts of your mind without which you couldn't function. But the point is they're neither negative nor virtuous. That's why you've got to understand these concepts in Buddhism, because it's not how we think in modern psychology. It's very distinct to the Buddha. So these ones, the mechanical parts of our mind, I call it that, they enable you to function. So whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration, good memory, good discrimination. You know, all those, they're really major parts of your mind. So in that category, oddly enough for us, there's another one that's called feeling, not as an equivalent of emotion, not like this at all. This is a primordial, and this is crucial for the Buddha. He points it out as one of the 5 aggregates, and it's in one of the 12 links. It plays a major role in creating our suffering and happiness. And there's every millisecond we are having one of these feelings, and there's only 3 kinds. Happy or pleasant, unhappy, unpleasant, or neutral. Well, can we forget the neutral, please? We don't care about them. As far as we are concerned, there's only 2. And we only want the nice ones, and we do not want the bad ones. This is the nature of samsara, and everybody is driven like this. So the key delusion, the 3 poisons, right? The 3 poisons, ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And they're not just random states of mind. They've got a very clear connection to each other and a hierarchical relationship as well. The root one, the root ignorance, the root one, ego grasping, marigpa, the primordial delusion, you know, that grasps at an inherent intrinsic me and everything else, which we'll get in the 6 perfections on the weekend. Then they've got the main voice of that ego grasping is attachment, this emotional hunger to get what that I wants. And then aversion, the panic attack of aversion and anger and despair, depression and annoyance, upset or irritation, a whole spectrum of aversion when it doesn't get what it wants. There's a really close relationship. So these are vital to understand, you know. Now I'm losing my plot. Where was I? Attachment, aversion. Why am I saying that? A feeling. Okay, feeling. Okay, feeling. So feeling, you've either got a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or the neutral. Forget the neutral. And this is every millisecond. Every millisecond. An attachment's job is to find the object such that when we have contact with it, it triggers a pleasant feeling. That's how we get happy, and that's how we get, and that's how we suffer. When attachment gets an object or has contact with something that triggers aversion, that's a disaster. That's suffering. And so we just, and this is just how we live in samsara, you know. So the way karma works, one negative state of mind drives you to do something with your body and speech to harm another. That's the heaviest kind of negative action. And then you've got a virtuous action, which is a state of mind that's virtuous, that drives you to do an action with your body and speech that benefits another. So the very first level of practice has nothing to do with compassion yet. The wisdom wing is nothing to do with helping others. It's putting yourself together, you know, helping yourself first. So the first one, the first main instruction, the essence of the first scope is the law of karma. Back off, honey child, mind your own business and stop harming others. That's it. He doesn't say stop eating 6 pieces of cake. He doesn't say stop, you know, buying too many pretty dresses. But we can kind of extrapolate, you know. We can get that. So the major actions that, you know, that we do that are the heaviest are those that harm others. And they're the actions that are driven by a deluded state of mind. It's kind of logical if we think about it. So this is the key point. There's nothing to do with punishment. We have a very powerful view of punishment and reward. We think in those terms, you know. We think in those terms. But there's no concept like that in Buddhism. There is no punisher. There is no rewarder. So we need to think it through carefully. And I think in our biggest problem in our culture, we don't like the view of karma much. We don't really think it through properly, you know. But if we don't understand karma, we do not understand Buddhism. It's very simple. The vast majority of people on the planet who like Buddhism know nothing about karma and don't care, and even don't think it's relevant, you know. But if we don't understand this, we don't understand Buddhism. Very simple. There's no way we can understand becoming a Buddha. There's no way we can understand becoming anything if we don't understand karma. This is the most fundamental teaching of the Buddha's view, you know. Everything sentient beings do and say and think is the process that produces who we become and then indeed our experiences. So the first way, there are 4 ways that our actions ripen in the future. 4 ways, negative or positive. The first one is a type of rebirth. So the heaviest negative actions, those driven by anger, you know, negativity, and actions done by the build up, the accumulation of those in our mind, they will ripen at the time of your death. Because all your karmic seeds are there, like in your bank vault. And one of those karmic seeds will be triggered, the main karmic seeds will be triggered at that point, which will already program you, even before you stop breathing, will already program you to your next life. So if a negative karmic seed is triggered, one of negativity, of harming in the past or whatever, that will program you to go to be born as a being with a body of the 4 elements, predominantly fire, with this nightmarish karmic appearances of incredible suffering. Or a spirit, which is more to do with attachment energy, and almost you could argue the 4 elements are mainly air energy, and your mind's conjoined with that, and you fit from pillar to post and have these weird, terrible suffering karmic appearances. And the third kind of suffering, the third of the 3 realms, the 3 lower realms, is an animal, a body, you know, with a mind that's very deluded and very limited. These are the 3 major results of a negative action, a complete negative action. The first way karma ripens is a type of rebirth. Now, the second way that our karma ripens in that body is as your mind, your thoughts and feelings and emotions, your tendencies, you know. And this is the biggest one we've got to get so clear, because even though we're Buddhists and we like karma, blah, blah, but we still believe I've got this because of this gene and my brain this and my mother this and my father that, and I'm this way because the Catholics did this to me. We still fall into that trap, you know. We've got to be so crystal clear about it. We've got to just think it through to understand, to put all this stuff together, you know. It's not a contradiction. So everything we think and do and say, everything is programmed in our own mind, which is not physical. So when you're born, so in our case, we got a human body, and that means a virtuous karmic seed of non-killing. And we'll go into this. Non-killing is the most powerful virtuous action. That ripens as a human body. So we've got one of those. So the second way our karma is ripening, isn't it, is our tendencies, our mental tendencies. And this is the point. They would, at the time of our death, when the karmic seed of non-killing was triggered, even before we stopped breathing, and we're already programmed to go out, to go to our current mother's fallopian tube, right? That was already booked up, already organized. At the same time, all the karmic seeds that provide you with a personality, whether you're Hitler or Mother Teresa, all those mental tendencies, which are basically a bunch of habits. Anger, love, kindness, being good at football, music, intelligent, not intelligent, all your mental tendencies, all of these are already programmed before you get anywhere near your mother. They're yours. And this is a crucial point. They're your states of mind. Now, your mother might share them. My mother was good at music. She taught her little Bobsy how to sing. People say, well, obviously Robina got her music from her mummy. Well, she didn't. My mummy was good at music because she practiced it before and brought it with her. I must have been good at music before and I brought it with me. And conveniently, I got a nice mum who could teach me. You could get cancer. You have all the genes in your family, all cancer. Oh, of course I got it from my genes. No. Due to past killing, you get born to a mother whose genes have that tendency, but the fact that you get cancer and you even get those genes, that's from your past actions. So the first way karma ripens, type of rebirth. Second way our karma ripens is a type of mind within that rebirth, whether you're a dog, a monkey, or a hell being, or a god, or whatever, you know, all your mental tendencies. The third way your karma ripens, this is called experiences similar to the cause, you know? And I mean, you can see we're very social beings, aren't we? We live in relation to others. So you could argue simply this third one, the second one is like your tendencies, your mental tendencies similar to the cause, which is having done them before, whether it's playing music or whatever, you know? The third one is your experiences similar to the cause. And this is what happens to you. So in a sense, you think about it, since you're born, you can see you've met a bunch of people, dogs, cockroaches, husbands, you know, and you can argue that some of them are nice to you and some are mean, and they swap roles. We can see that. So basically how we're seen and treated by others is this third one. You could argue something like that. The way we're seen and treated by others. So you could be born a human, which is non-killing, but you might have be born with a tendency to kill. And then, or you might have the third one, due to past killing, you get killed or die young. So that's the experience similar to the cause of killing. Having a tendency to not kill is the tendency from not killing, because they're like 4 tracks of karma. And this is the major one for us. We wonder why good things happen to bad people. No, we wonder why bad things happen to good people. Well, we also wonder why bad things happen to good people. That's because of their separate tracks of karma. They're all from the past. So you can have negative tendencies, but everybody adores you and believes your words. So 50% of Americans believe Mr. Trump and 50% don't, or whatever, you know. He's got karma with those people from speaking the truth in the past, and whatever he says, they adore him and they believe his words. People who can't stand the sight of him, he's got karma with them due to having negative karma with them, you know. The fourth way our karma ripens is the environment. We don't float in the sky. So the first result of killing, born in one of the suffering realms. The second result of killing, tendency to keep killing. The third result of killing, you get killed or die young. The fourth result of killing, you get sick. Look at COVID. The collective karma, and it's the environmental karma takes the longest to ripen, like millions of years, of lifetimes, I think. So the collective karma of us humans, you know, of past killing, that we get sick. Or dying young is the experience similar to the cause. And the environment, you're sick, your body's unhealthy, let's say, you know, the food is bad, the water's terrible, the air's polluted, or you get harmed easily. Or on the other hand, you're like Warren Buffett, who's 96, who's fat and healthy. He said he started feeling old when he was 90. And he's famous for his simple diet. Since he's a little boy, his main food every day, without exception, is cheeseburgers, vanilla ice cream, and some version of Coca-Cola. And he's 96 and healthy. That's because of non-killing in the past that's ripened for him, both in terms of the experience similar to the cause of non-killing and the environmental result of non-killing. But I don't know, he might have a tendency to kill. I don't know. I haven't read about that. So if we understand just these 4 things, you can describe your entire life to yourself. Because we know we've got tendencies, we have a type of body, we have experiences, we're seen a certain way, and the environment impacts upon us. There's nothing else left. There's 4 ways. So if you use that as your basis, you can interpret everything. So instead of the pain and the drama of why is she not believing my words when I'm speaking the truth, you know damn well why. One of my past lying karma's ripened, you know. Straight away you own it. Straight away you own it, you know. Instead of feel like a victim, poor me, not fair. That's how we feel. We believe we didn't ask to get born. It's a joke. We say it. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. And then I get carried away and I think, well, you know, if you did have the view that someone else made you, I agree with you. How dare they? It's the most shocking thing I've ever heard. But some 2 wacky people with delusions decide to make another person call you and they chuck you out and then say, now it's your fault. I think you should sue your mother if she did make you. I'm not joking. But she didn't. She just kindly gave you a body, you know. Thanks, Mum. Do you understand me? I know I say stupid things, but it's good to think about it. So this doesn't mean the outside world doesn't play a role. We're completely, every single, so, okay, the best way to talk about the outside world, my feeling is, the best way to talk about it is everything in the outside world is merely a catalyst for you to have an experience. That's it. But you caused it all. You would not even see a rainbow if you hadn't had some virtuous karma in the past. You would not, you know, walk down the street and you have there's a smell coming from a house. That's a moment of your own negative karma. It's not meant to be superstition. Karma, if it's a natural law, there's an explanation of every tiny event, every millisecond of every thought, every event, everything. It's a natural law, just like botany. With botany, you don't think, well, some seeds bring flowers and the rest are just hippy-trippy. No, it's a natural law and it's coherent and it has to work every time. That's what natural law means. Karma is a natural law. It's not mysterious. Okay, to know every detail, that's another discussion, but the principles are pretty clear. And if we can start applying these, I tell you, this is junior school. This can transform our lives when we start to get more grown up. It lessens attachment, it lessens anger, it lessens self-pity, it lessens poor me, it lessens anxiety, because you realize everything you're experiencing, like Lama Zopa says, is your own karmic appearance. So you own it, you know, you own it, it's yours, it's your life is your garden. So the 4 ways of karma ripens: type of rebirth, tendencies, experiences, and the environment. The horrible ones are the fruit of negativity, the nice ones are the fruit of virtue. So just focusing on this one, and if you didn't ever go further than this one, you get delicious lives, life after life after life, and you'd be cool. You'd get happiness, an ordinary happiness, and we all want that one. So that alone, this is the method. This is Buddha's method. Just be nice to people. Don't harm them. Don't kill. Don't lie. Don't steal. And then, you know, be generous and you'll get rich next life with a lovely body. People adore you. Don't get lied to, stolen from. I mean, everybody wants that happiness. That's a tangible happiness. If you want that, abide by the laws of karma. That's Buddha's methodology. That's his recipe. The next kind of suffering. So, okay, there's that one. There's no time to go into more details. Any questions about that one? Then we've got, how much have we got left? Okay, we'll manage. Any questions about this one? Karma.
And if you're online, you can just raise your hand.
Yeah. Just generally about karma, get some clarity about karma.
Anyone in here? Oh, in the back here, Susie.
I'm sure we can go to it more in the weekend. We have more time.
Hello.
Hi, sweetheart. Yeah.
The collective karma, the 4th one.
Yeah.
For everybody.
No, not collective karma. It's environmental karma. But I happen to say that COVID, for example, would be, because so many millions got it, it's like a collective karma, but it's environmental karma. That's the type of karma it is.
Is it still individual?
I can't hear you.
Is environmental karma still individual?
No,
like based.
it's a collective karma doesn't mean environmental. It happened to be collective karma could also be you'll get shot. where you all get your, you live in a lovely town where you get really good grants from the government. That's collective karma. Collective karma is when a group of you experience something together. That's the point about collective.
And
So
collective
yes,
karma.
of course it's individuals. A group is a bunch of individuals, isn't it?
Okay.
So this is a group here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all come together seemingly randomly, but there's some karmic connection we've got as a group based. I mean, this is not coming from all being, this group hasn't come together as a result of, learning about guns 4 lives ago. This is a different kind of group, So there's collective karma here. Families, countries, females, males, tall people, short, all act as collective karma. You could argue like that. Similar kind of results. Do you understand? Yeah. Someone else. Yes. Yes, darling, talk to me. Oh, no, okay, you're just being the helper. No, okay. So the first level of practice, if we're looking at the Lam Rim, the essence of this first scope really is karma. Everything leads to that. The conclusion, the culmination of this first scope, thinking about impermanence, blah, refuge, it gets you to now where you start to practice. It primes your mind ready to start to practice. And the basis of this is, why do I want to not kill? Not because God said, I'm not being rude about God, and not because I'll get punished, which is our instinct. Or we might just say, oh, well, it just seems like the right thing to do. That's not enough. I'm sorry, you have to be logical. So let's look at this one. Again, this point is very helpful. I have this Christian friend years ago, a priest, a Catholic. I always mention this. And I said it probably even yesterday. I said, and we need to understand this. What is a negative action? I mean, we all say, oh, yeah, negative action, positive action. Oh, yeah. Hurting people, yeah, we understand. But why? What's the logic of it? Got to be logic to it, not just emotional. So for the Christians, and this is a vital point, a sin is defined as an action you do that God said not to. That's what makes it wrong. I'm not criticizing, please. That's what makes it wrong. We understand that. You live in your mother's house, you're a child, and she says you've got to do the dishes and don't do this and do that. Your mummy's the boss. And if you do it, you're a naughty girl. It's not they call natural negativity. It's not a natural negativity. Buddhism calls it that. It's one that's a conventional one. And mummy's the boss. It's wrong because mummy said. So nothing wrong with that. And there's even some of those in Buddhism. Buddha made up his rules, when he had these monks and nuns come along. The nuns managed to get in there. They went around and doing their begging with their bowl, and they kind of developed laws as they needed it, which is how every country works. And you go around with your bowl, you're supposed to beg and accept what you're given. So one of the vows is, if you don't hide your vegetables because you're attached to the rice. So you're going along and you kind of put you put other things on top of your veggies so people don't think you've got veggies, they'll give you more veggies. That's a vow. That is Buddha's vow. That's Buddha's law. There are those, but the natural negativities, they're the ones, and they're about, do you understand my natural negativities, natural law? But for this priest said to me, there is an aspect of natural law about killing being wrong, meaning that people don't like getting killed. That's the natural law part. But the main part is because God said. And if that's the case and you have faith in God, then perfect. Do God's will, please. But not for the Buddha. You're not doing Buddha's will. In other words, you ask Buddha, why is killing wrong? And he says, it's a natural law. People don't like getting killed. That's it. Do you hear me, people? That's the logical reason. And it's evident to anybody with half a brain. That's why killing is called a negative action. It harms others. So he's got his little list of 10, just like Jesus, little list of 10 don'ts, isn't it? The difference is one lot you go against God, the other lot you go against natural law. Don't kill, don't steal. The 3 of the body: don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, and don't kill. And 4 of the speech: don't lie, don't badmouth behind backs, don't rabbit on about nothing, and don't be abusive. They're all actions that harm others. It's pretty clear. They're the first 7 of his little list, isn't it? It's pretty evident. So, now this is the point. They are labeled negative because they harm others. But this is the point we don't get. The reason behind why Buddha exhorts us not to do them at this point is not based on compassion, is not because they harm others, is because, guess what, honey, he says, it will harm you. That's the point. That's the reason for the first level of karma. It's the method to stop harming yourself. You can, of course, be motivated by compassion if you want, but that doesn't come. That comes later. You've got to have compassion for yourself. That's not how they say it, but that's how we'd say it. And that's why I think so many people in the West, oh, I have compassion for others, but not for myself. It's because you haven't done this work. And why? Because we don't realize that what we think and do and say is what produces us. We think it's kind of a system out there, and if no one sees you do it, you got away with it. That's how we all think. It's like absurd. It's like infantile. It's like going to your doctor and he says, don't smoke. Why not? Because I will punish you with cancer. So you go home and there's no doctor. Oh, she doesn't see me, so out come the Marlboros. I won't get cancer. That's how we think about morality. It's very infantile. Whereas, as even my Catholic mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. That's the view of karma, that what we think and do and say is what produces us now and the future. That's intense. But we understand when it comes to food, we are geniuses when it comes to food. We are all scientists when it comes to nutrition. And there's no way in the universe, if we don't understand all the nutrition information, and there might be something in there that might be a peanut, and you might die, you'd rather starve to death. But when it comes to the mind, as long as no one sees us do it, we got away with it. We're demented, I tell you. Are we communicating? So we've got to have some self-respect. That's the purpose of the first level. Because you can't bear the thought of more suffering. Who wants to pollute their mind with negative? I mean, the body, we're not even talking about the mind yet, that comes next. This is the actions of body and speech. And of course, it's negative here because it's driven. That's what makes it negative. Driven by a delusion, driven by attachment or aversion. That's how it is, you know. So for any action to be called what is a complete action, such that that drops the seed into your bank vault, that will be one that will be triggered at the time of your death, that'll determine your type of rebirth, okay? It has to have 4 things in place. You know, I feel like a fraud. I've been coming here since 1997 or maybe 1996, and I say the same things every time, and I think you're going to catch me out one day because I keep saying the same things, but I suppose you're new people, so it doesn't matter. Isn't it true, Donna? This is true, and it helps me as well. So, listen, the 4 things in place in order for an action of killing to be labeled a complete negative action, such that it gets you a lower realm rebirth, the tendency to keep killing, if it's killing, the tendency to get killed or die young, and a lousy environment, okay? So, those 4 things are this. It's a mouse in your kitchen. The first of the 4 to be in place in order to qualify as a complete action has to be an object, and that means a living being. Killing is an action of a living being. If it's a dead mouse, then it's not a complete action of killing. It's just you being demented, whacking the mouse, you know. You understand? You didn't kill anybody. You're crazy. You're angry. Yeah, that's true. So, okay, there has to be a living being. Second, I put it this way, your mind involved in it, okay? 2 parts. There's more than 2, but this is the essence. One part is 2A. 2A is intention, not motivation, but bare bones volition. I will kill the mouse, something like that. But the crucial piece, 2B, which gives it the flavor of whether it's negative or positive and the intensity of it, is the motivation. So typically you kill a mouse because you think they're so disgusting. How dare it be in my kitchen, you know, isn't it? Third, you do the action. 4, dead mouse. That's a complete action of killing, roughly speaking. And non-killing, flip it over, you know, it's the same. So the interesting point is this. Again, like Donna might have a mouse, and Andre has a mouse, and I have a mouse. So let's say I'm a typical, ordinary, full, you know, a complete one of killing, all those 4 in place. But Donna, she mightn't even see the mouse. So the first one, there is a mouse. That's there. Second one, intention to kill, she doesn't see it. How can there be intention? No, therefore there can be no motivation, no compassion, or no anger, you know. Third one, she steps on the mouse, and 4, the mouse dead. But she almost creates no karma. And all what this is pointing out is the is the centrality of the role of the mind, you know. Which doesn't mean I can run around killing if I don't know about it. That's not the point. It's just pointing out karma, because karma, the main word, the meaning of karma is mental karma, and that's the word intention, volition, I will, and it's there every millisecond. If you want a boss in your mind, intention, not motivation, but bare bones volition, I will. May I will, may it, I will. That's intention, and that's there every second. So I will kill, or I will not kill, you know, whichever one it is. So that's a complete negative action. So if she has a mouse but doesn't see, so there's almost no karma. He might have a mouse and he's attached, and he might have, oh, his pussycat. This is very common. Every one of you in this room, I'm sure, has, as we all say, put your cat down, put your dog down, and we all cry about it. Isn't it? People get sad, they love their animals and everything. And then your poor little pussycat's suffering, so you think, I have to kill it. And you say it that way. We say it that way. I had to kill it. No, you chose to kill it. But we don't want to think of it that way, you know. So let's say Andre kills his cat or his dog or his wife. You could argue. We do these days now more and more. It's a permission. You've got permission to kill now, isn't it? It's easier to get to be, they've got names for it. In Canada, they call it MAID. In Australia, they call it something else. Well, you get, you know, you get permitted to die, to kill yourself, isn't it? I know I'm sounding like I'm joking about it, but it's a bit unfortunate, isn't it, I think? Then never mind. But with our animals, our poor vets spend all their time killing animals now. So Andre could kill his cat, and he really is compassionate. He sees the cat is suffering, and he really has compassion for the cat. And he feels he's got no choice, which is very common. Well, then you could argue, because his motivation is compassion, you could argue, for his side, not much negative karma. But that's just one thing. We never go through and think the rest of it. So the point is, his reason for killing the cat was for the benefit of the cat, right? So if you take the view that the cat's consciousness will continue to another life, and if you take the view of the death process, that at the time of dying, certain things happen, and the karmic seed of the pussycat will be triggered that will determine its next life, given that he hasn't got wisdom. Okay, Dalai Lama says, Lama Zopa says, compassion isn't enough. No, Lama Zopa says, meaning well isn't enough. For him, it's fine. You could argue that. But you don't go around killing with a good, oh, I'll kill you with a good motivation. No, back off, please. But I'm trying to get a point here. But he's meant well. But where was his wisdom? Does he have clairvoyance? Can he see the mind of his cat? Can he really have confidence that when he kills that cat, that it'll get a decent human rebirth and meet the Dalai Lama and get a good spiritual path? No, he can't. Well, then stop playing Russian roulette with your pussycat, please. You're fine. But why do you think it's fine for the cat? Our trouble is we don't posit reincarnation. That's our trouble. So we've got to think it through, you know. Are we communicating here? It's a difficult one. It is very difficult. And now, a friend of mine in Canada, she's decided to kill herself, you know. Can't help it. What can you do? Degenerate times. And it's not, you see, it's not, got to understand this. It's not a moralistic issue. You shouldn't kill yourself because you're naughty. It's because you don't have the wisdom. It's as simply is. I mean, if you were clairvoyant, if you were a holy being, if you were, you know, I mean, I always think of those two monks in Vietnam, you know, when there was a big uprising from all the Christian government was down on the Buddhists. It wasn't because of the war. There was a big drama in Saigon, you know, and that famous photo of one or two monks burned to death. They obviously had samadhi. They went straight into a single point of concentration where you go beyond your senses. Do you understand me? So you could argue they had a positive motivation. You can't guarantee it. They might have, but they certainly wouldn't have suffered. Do you see my point? Because they had gone beyond the concept of the sensory consciousness. So you can see it's possible to do negative actions with a pure motivation. But the point about the very first level of practice, this is the very first level. This is the Hinayana level. And there's no wiggle room. You just don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. You're not getting clever. That comes into the bodhisattva path where you can be more nuanced. And you've got virtue now. And you can do actions even that are negative, but you can be certain they're driven by virtue. But we can't play with that. At this level, it's very simple. Discipline your body and your speech and back off. Do you understand? Nevertheless, there's levels of, you know, you could kill somebody, he could kill his, if he might, I might kill with delight and want the animal to suffer. The karma is 1,000,000 times heavier. Of course it is. There's many factors that determine the intensity of the good or bad karma. But just examples. Hers, because she wasn't aware there's a mouse there. She didn't see the animal. There was no motivation. You could argue there's almost no karma created. For him, you could argue not much negative karma created. For me, there was a fully developed 4 pieces in place, negative action. Do you understand? So it's very nuanced, and we've got to be clear. But just to be clear, first get your details clear, you know? Are we communicating here? The other thing that's so crucial here, we're only at the first scope. Never mind. We'll have to carry on the weekend. Is And Lama Zopa, and all the Tibetans, especially the Tibetan Lamas, really emphasize, and Lama Zopa emphasizes this tremendously. And we get it clear. It's kind of encouraging. You know, the bare bones thing is just don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Great. But the point is this: when we understand this point about what's in when your mind isn't involved, then there's no karma. So here we are being very nice people in this room at this moment, and not one of us is killing anybody. We're being very nice people, but we're not creating any karma of non-killing. This is something we've got to get our head around. We're not killing right now, which is fantastic, but because there is no thought, I will not kill. So the virtuous action of non-killing, we've got to remember this, these virtuous actions, they're not, there's all this first level of virtuous actions are called refrain, all the first set of vows, the first instructions are the virtuous actions of refraining from harming. Even the bodhisattva vows, which are much more advanced, are the virtuous actions of refraining from harming, but they're based on motivation. It's only when you get to the level of the bodhisattva path and the six perfections that you actually start to do actions of benefiting others. Virtuous actions of benefiting others. These are actions, these are called actions of non-harming. And the vows, the pratimoksha vows, the vows in the first scope, and even the bodhisattva vows, are vows of non-harming. So I think also we get a bit kind of weird about don't do this and don't do that. We feel like we're being squashed, you know? But when you think about this, and this is where we're going to come to vows now, when you say don't, okay, never mind that. We'll go there in a second. So all these are framed in terms of a virtuous action of refraining from killing. We don't think that way. We just think, oh, I'm a nice person, you know, it's kind of mutual. But no, so at the first point, it is if you don't have a vow. So this is where vows are unbelievably powerful, and we can't get ahead without them. But we have to understand them psychologically, and we don't. We just think it's someone squashing me, saying, don't do this and don't do that, and you get punished. That's why we don't like the idea of vows, you know. But I think it's very silly, because if you think about anything you've learned to do, you learn two things. You learn a series of things not to do and a series of things to do. So when you learn to drive a car, if you wrote down everything that you first learned, heard it, and then learned and were taught by your car driver, and then learned and internalized to the point where it's second nature, you'd have a list of hundreds of things. I don't just mean road rules. I will never put the foot on the brake at the same time as the accelerator. Everybody vows to do that, do you not? And why? Because you smash yourself and the car into smithereens if you do it. So we understand don't do this. That's how we frame learning. But as soon as we hear vow, oh, no one's going to tell me what to do. Do you understand? Because you don't think it has consequences. It's so ridiculous, I tell you. So vows are delicious. Why do you refrain from doing those things? Because you want to be a good car driver. That's your method. And why do you want to stop killing, stealing, lying? Because you're trying to turn yourself into a nice person, a happy person. It's the method to get happiness. Are we communicating? We should be happy to live in vows. And as Lama Zopa says, we are insane not to live in vows. In fact, we can't get ahead without living in vows. So we have to look at why. This is Buddha's teaching. I mean, Alex Berzin, that American scholar, says that they say in some of the teachings that vows, these vows that you take from Buddha's vows, you sit in front of the Buddha and or a person representing Buddha, you know, whatever, tracks down the knowledge holders up to the present day, you sit in front of your Lama, and then you repeat after him, I will never steal, I will never kill, I will never lie. So these are Buddha's vows, a little package he put together. And so Alex Berzin says vows in your mind stream are so powerful that they're like subtle physical energy visible to clairvoyance, which sounds very kind of cosmic, but it means it's kind of intense. And I think we understand that. Well, you know very well when you make a decision not to do something, that's when you'll do it. I will not eat more than 5 pieces of cake. That's the diet I went on. Not that one. I lost, since I saw you last, or the year before, I can't remember, lost 25 pounds or something. It was because I decided to go on a diet, and the diet was called eating less, which means my mind had to decide, I will not eat more than this amount of food. And guess what? I did it, because you decided. Do you understand me? We all know decisions, when you decide to not do something or decide to do something, you will do it. Therefore, it's more powerful for you mentally. That guided me. I knew every time I ate my food, I was checking the calories. I knew I had to have a certain number, and so that it was like on my shoulder, guiding me. That's just an ordinary action. That's the power of vows, They say they protect you. So it's amazing that you want to be, when we decide to take refuge and then take the lay vows, we should be so blissing out. You've made a decision to turn yourself into a non-harming person. It's so amazing. It's so marvelous, Who does that on this planet? Nobody. So the vow is this, as Lama Zopa says. Okay, as the teachings say, normally for you to pop into your bank vault a rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seed just in order to get another decent human body. That's the main function, to get a decent human body among the bodies to get, is a non-killing karma. That's the most powerful one. One Lama was asked, what's one piece of advice you'd give? Don't kill. And it's obvious. It's the heaviest one, driven by the heaviest delusion, isn't it? It's obvious, So merely not killing, like we are here, is no karma being created because the mind isn't involved. There's no intention. There's no intention, I will not kill, because there's no sentient being in front of us, So we're not creating any virtue. We're just sitting on our laurels. So if you have a vow not to kill, because you sat down in that person, you repeated, imagine it was Buddha, from this time till time of my death, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never lie. And it's in your mind, in your mind stream, or as we'd say, it's in your brain, and it guides you. And the reason is because you want to become a better human being. You want to be happy, not just be kind to people. Of course, there's compassion there, but the first one is it's your method for making you into a future happy person. Okay, it takes time. It's tremendously powerful. And so as Lama Zopa says, 24 hours a day that you have that vow in your mind stream and you're keeping it and then doing your purification at the end of the day, which is the other powerful method, you are ticking over virtuous karmic, non-killing karmic seeds and dropping them into your bank vault 24 hours a day. You can't get ahead without living in vows. That's how they say, This is the logic of it. So it should be driven by a delight, not just being squashed. It's the way to drive really well. When you see it that way, it's a revelation, Not just being squashed, not allowed to have fun. Then the other, that's one way to really create masses of virtuous karma every day, effortlessly. While you're asleep, while you're in bed with your best new boyfriend, having the best sex on the planet, you're ticking over virtuous karma of non-killing every second. Are we communicating? You don't laugh at me at all anymore. You used to laugh at me. I crack jokes, and there you go, now you laugh, okay? This is this English comedian. Only old people will know. Do you everybody knows the two Ronnies? No? Ronnie Corbett, anybody knows the British comedians? No, you haven't heard of them. All the Brits know anyway. And when I used to live in London in the 80s, as a nun, everybody said, I thought you were Ronnie Corbett. This little fellow, about 5'2", big, kind of perky and happy with bright eyes and glasses. Everybody thought I was this funny English comedian. It was very funny, You don't know who he is, it doesn't matter. So vows are incredible. And the other one, as Lama Zopa says, you're insane not to do it every day, is purify. Do your four opponent powers. You regret. You check your day, check your life, and you think, I did this and I did that and I did this. And you know what, Robina, I regret having done that. And not guilt. It's not guilt, which is what we mostly have. Or it's not, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I'm naughty. You recognize you did do it because you didn't know any better. You drop that seed in your mind when you killed, stole, lied, whatever. And you say, I regret having dropped that seed and I don't want it to ripen. So I regret it from the depths of my heart because I'm sick of suffering. Then you think, well, whom can I turn to? The Buddha, he's our doctor. He is not your creator. He is not your forgiver. He is your doctor. So you rely upon him. Then you have compassion for those you harmed. Then you do the practice, reciting the mantra, whatever, the visualization. We'll do more later. And then you vow not to do it again. So if you have live-in vows and do your purification, this is the method. It's not secret. This is the method to turn yourself into a happy, compassionate, kind, person with a good life, good body, good experiences, and everything else. And add the Dharma to that, then you're home, you know. That's the first kind of happiness. That's stopping the first kind of suffering. Are we communicating? Oh, we've still got 45 minutes. Oh, okay, now I can do the second kind of suffering. Any questions about the first kind of suffering and how to stop it? But I like to put it in terms of how to get happy. It sounds a bit boring to be free of suffering, but it's a proactive way to get happy. You've got to realize that. Do you understand me? Okay, good. Yes, sweetheart. Go, darling.
Would you ever investigate retrospectively your karma? So meaning that
Put it
you know,
out.
you told us about what to do about having good karma in the future, but
Yes.
would you ever investigate retrospectively why things are happening to you?
Say more about that. Say more about that.
So I'm thinking about a medical perspective.
Good, good,
You
go
know,
on.
you were telling us about, you know, certain diseases, so forth, happening to us because
Well, the
of
main
our
cause
good-
is the conditions at the moment, the bad food, the wrong conditions, the weather, you know, whatever the external conditions are dealing. And that's what doctors and you're a medical person, you'd be dealing with those conditions. But from the bigger point perspective, it's the past actions that cause those. So then the question within that was what?
really would you investigate it?
So
would
say
you
more
go-
about that.
Would you go into?
Oh, you mean
want-
you try to
wanna
look at the reason
understand,
why that particular sickness, you mean?
to cure, to help those kind of things which are happening to us.
Oh, I
because
see.
of
No,
our previous-
yes, that's a purification practice. You wouldn't do, I mean, unless you're clairvoyant, you can't do the analysis, but you can do some deductions. I mean, for example, forget the sickness one, that's the body, but some suffering we have would be that people at work don't like us or don't believe our words. We all have those experiences, family things, all the dramas we have with human beings. Those ones, you can deduce pretty clearly the action that must have caused it. If you don't believe my words, it's because I've lied to you, not in this life. We've got to take this view of reincarnation. So whatever some past recent life we had a history where no matter what I say, you don't believe me. So that I can deduce very clearly. So in terms of the body and sickness, generally speaking, sickness is the fruit of killing, getting sick, or in general harming people, physically harming people. I mean, it's fairly sort of, you can imagine the relationship, you know. So being lied to is from having lied. Not being believed is not getting credit. You're always losing your money, can't get a job. You can kind of deduce a little bit the actions. But I think the sickness one, I mean, it's hard to know, unless you're clairvoyant, it's hard to know why cancer, you know. Look at the external thing, yeah, but why cancer? Why or why any particular sickness is hard to know. It is hard to know. But if you went to your Tibetan doctor, because they're so, their system is based on the Vajrayana. There's no time to talk about it, but the Vajrayana system of how we are constructed is we've got gross consciousness and gross body, and the gross consciousness is a sensory, inextricably linked to the physical body. Then we've got what they call subtle consciousness, which is all our thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that's linked to a subtler physical energy. This is like the Chinese system, the Ayurvedic system, the Tibetan doctors for sure. And we've got this subtle nervous system, and then the relation, all these subtle air, I think it was, the 4 elements, and the wind, the air element coursing through all these channels, which is the subtle physicality. And the Tibetan doctor will feel the imbalance of your 4, of your elements. She'll feel the imbalance of this certain wind energy, and she'll know it's related to your attachment energy. That's why you're having anxiety and panic attacks, or that's why you're having certain things physically. They could deduce it in that way, at a more subtle level. Do you understand me? But I think from our own point of view, in general, in relation to actions that happen to us, we can deduce. So then we would regret and this is why the 4 opponent powers is a very powerful one to change. Like when you say someone's not liking you at work, or not believing you, or blaming you for something. The way to deal with it karmically, you do your purification, and your first step would be, I regret whatever I must have done to harm other, whichever life it was, deeply regret that because you don't like the suffering. And that regret is one of the things that purifies is that kind of experience. Then you have the second step, you have compassion for this person, then you purify, and then don't be surprised, that can change the karma, and before you know it, they start to like you. You with me? That's the way it works. So the purification practice is the method you're using to try and clean up, hasten, right even now, hasten the purification. But certainly for the future, it'll work. That's how we think about it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone else? Yes.
So the vow of not killing is clear, but what happens when it's indirectly? When you are creating suffering not directly, like eating meat,
Okay,
Right.
good. I understand.
or paying taxes, and your taxes being used for bombing
No, exactly. All of these things.
other
No, this is,
countries.
exactly. So exactly, of course. So you know, you can have a straightforward, complete action of killing, uncomplicated. That's true. But then you've got so many other variations. So then the one of eating meat. Well, first of all, we only ever call it eating meat, but the better way to put it really is that it's any action we do that involves harming animals for our benefit. That can include silk, shoes, belts, medicine, isn't all those actions. We can see that. So we've got to get the big picture there. So, you know, the Buddhist approach is not a, I mean, we can see if you get the Buddhist approach, just by existing, we are harming. You know, I mean, the very small, tiny creatures, our body's like a walking zoo. Just by eating any food, I'm sure we're harming others. Breathing, we're harming sentient beings. I remember one time even as a vegetarian, still billions of creatures die for your veggies. You know, you can't avoid killing. So all we can do, given that we're in this crazy world where we harm others, is at least be conscious as possible and make as much intention as possible based on compassion to do what we can to lessen harming. Be conscious of it. It's the best thing we can do, because it's all we can do. I mean, to try and have an external result of no animals dying, forget that. You can't do that. But at least we can do our part in doing our best. You know, I'm not even saying to be a vegetarian, but to do what we can, given our personality and our type of person. I mean, for example, if, you know, I mean, I'd say from my mind, it's good that I don't eat meat, or I do sometimes, but because I'm attached to meat. So it's better for my sake that I don't eat meat because I'm attached to it. One of my sisters never ate meat, but was told to for the doctors, and she was sad. So how could you argue for her it was negative? So much of it's to do with what's in your mind, you know? But the other one is too, the vegetarian one. I mean, I always tell this story too. In Leeds, in England, years ago, I was in a cheese shop. I had a photo of me buying some kick-ass cheddar, right? And there's all these fundamentalist vegans got very upset. How dare you, a nun, eat cheese or whatever, you know? I don't want to be political, but I always wondered how many bugs die on the road. And sure enough, you Google it, some dude has done the research. It's like per number plate. It's like trillions of creatures slaughtered, you know? And he said, "Oh, you can't help that. That's just collateral damage." In other words, you're not, as soon as I think if you ate those bugs, you'd be called a monster. So it's a bit extreme. My feeling is we're so attached to food, we make a big fuss about being always about the meat. But I mean, look at the creatures that are harmed. And even then again, I looked up another story. I always tell this one. The scientist in Melbourne got fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans complaining, you know, and bossing people around, basically. And he talked about this wheat field. And in the off season, it was overrun by all these cute little field mice. He said they were so cute. He had photos of them, and they sang love songs to each other. And guess what they have to do when they plant their wheat? They slaughter the lot, and not kindly, I promise. Even that, he said, "Ah, well, you can't help it," which is completely hysterical. So to think that we're being so holy because we don't eat meat is a little bit narrow-minded, I'd suggest. May I suggest? Do you understand me? It's kind of ridiculous, in fact. So the big picture is, so we do what we can and have compassion. You know, it's all we can do, isn't it? What can we do? Do you understand? And the other thing I think, one more point I find interesting too, is not, we all think it's to do with demand, but one time in Maine, I read about years ago, there was an influx, the waters of Maine were kind of flooded with lobsters. 10 times more lobsters turned up. Nobody ordered them. No, but the lobsters didn't say, "Oh, better go to Maine, they're going to get more orders, we've got to fulfill orders." No. So, you know, whatever the karma of the fishermen, they were excited, but initially it collapsed the price. And the poor state government had to spend millions on marketing these wretched lobsters, you know. Karma takes care. You understand? So there's more, whatever. We do our best. And I think the big one is be conscious, be aware, and trying to have compassion, you know. And then I know, I mean, Lama Zopa became a vegetarian later in his life, but I know he'd say, even if you go, you can help though, if you're going to eat meat, at least say a mantra. He's got faith in this kind of thing. Say a mantra which blesses your breath, then you can blow on the meat and bless the creature. He said even a bone that's 1,000 years old because of the connection between that consciousness, wherever it is now, and that bone, the mind of the person, the mind of that who was that bone will get the benefit. That's what he said. You understand? And then with the taxes one, I know it's very funny. That what he can't help us and it's difficult. Or even I live in a place in New York and I pay maintenance, and I'm sure they bring in they slaughter the rats and the cockroaches I know they must, because I don't have one in my house. So I'm sort of happy they're not there, but I'm not happy that they're using my money to kill, and I can't say don't. So I get pujas down at Kopan for all the creatures my money kills, you know. I don't want a karmic debt with the cockroaches and the rats and the water bugs. What do you call them? Big ones like cockroaches. Yeah. Do what we can to mitigate, you know. So the second kind of suffering, this is now the middle scope. Here we become a Buddhist. This first one, of course, it's Buddhist view, but it's basically ethics, and that's common to the world, you know. Here now we get into being the unique Buddhist approach, which is dealing with the mind. So the main focus here is in the second kind of suffering, and looking at the causes of suffering. So we're doing both together, you know. The cause, and this gets to the root of it, is the mind. Because the body and the speech are just the servants of the mind. The body and speech have no power. They do what is in the mind. We know it's true, but we never think like that. We tend to think of ourselves as this big lump of me that does things. But really, you can divide yourself into three pits, and it's very helpful. You've got the body, you've got your speech, and you've got your mind. Well, the first level of practice is discipline the body and the speech. And we didn't even go into speech here. That's another whole discussion. I'm back to the first scope again. Speech for us, we might not kill and rape too many people, but our speech is our problem, you know. We just vomit everything out of our mouths. Some of us don't, but this is where our family, work, you know, we create so much problem with speech. So I think one of the most powerful practices, you know, not just to not lie, but to consciously decide in one day. And I think our life would change if we can really control what we say. It's a huge one, though. And the logic of it being in the first level is we're going to get to the level of working on the mind and learning to meditate. How can you possibly control your mind if you can't even control the servant of your mind? If you vomit everything out you think because you don't even know what's going on in your mind, then you're a disaster, you know. So learning to control our body and speech is first level. So powerful. And then we can now have space to really start to look inside, you know. So the framework here is understanding the Buddhist view of the mind. And basically speaking, as I said, there's negative lots, the rubbish ones, the deluded ones, the misconceptions, the unhappy thoughts, the afflictions, the delusions, and the three main poisons: ignorance, attachment, aversion. And then you've got the positive states of mind. And then you have this neutral lot, they call it the intention, concentration, all those ones. But the key thing here is to understand attachment. The key, they say really, Buddha says that basically attachment is the main cause in samsara, which is a big shock to us because we don't have much of a view of what attachment is. Not in our culture, not in our psychology, I don't think. And we need to understand it. It's fundamental. So it goes way more subtle than we can imagine. It's not just, oh, I like chocolate cake, you know. So this is why at the first level, it is learning to control mainly the attachment to the objects of the senses. That's the first level, and good enough. The very first level is you control your hand and you keep it in your lap after the third piece of cake. Now in the middle scope, you deal with attachment. You start to work with the attachment itself. And that's difficult because it's there all the time. It's primordial. And it's multifaceted, you know. So the main energy of attachment is dissatisfaction. And this is from practicing following attachment in countless lifetimes. And the only way to understand why dissatisfaction is the energy of attachment, and this is the part that we don't think about immediately, but is crucial to understand, is that the characteristic, okay, stop there. Go back a bit. And now let's look at the different ways the mind works in the Buddhist view. You've got the epistemological model of the mind, the actual way it functions. And then you've got the psychological model. So this is, you don't go into detail when you do in the Lam Rim on this, but it's important, I think, to understand it. It helps us. So the psychological model is dealing with the contents, attachment, anger, love, blah, blah. We'll do that in a second. But let's look at this first one. It's very helpful. So the epistemological model means the way the mind functions. And of course, we're not discussing the brain here. You've got to keep remembering, we're discussing the non-physical, subjective, cognitive process itself, okay? Which is not physical. So the simplest division of the way the mind functions is in sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. And these are distinctly different. And it's powerful to understand this, you know. So the sensory consciousnesses, and I always do the same example, the sensory consciousness, spelling it out using Buddhist words, eye consciousness is that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions, you know, in conjunction with the eyeball and all the bits and pieces working nicely, you know. Then your ear consciousness is that part of your mind that functions in relation to the bits and pieces working, the physical and the mental working together. But the point is here, the point I'm getting to, is mind's job is to cognize. The definition of mind is that which cognizes, that which is aware or knows. These words are synonymous. So I will look at this cup and I might say, I wouldn't especially, but let's just say, no other thing to look at. Never mind. I would say, well, let's say whatever I'm saying. I'll say, well, it's not a very pretty cup. I would say that. So then we naturally assume my eyeball is seeing a pretty, and not a very pretty cup, isn't it? We think that. My eyes go there and out of my mouth comes this view, you know. But what's happening is this. Sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. They've got tremendous power. We make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe says. You know, our sensory experiences run the show. But we need to do this analysis, right? Eye consciousness, all the senses can only cognize very limited things. Eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. It can't even articulate that, but that's the object of eye consciousness. Shape and color, that's it. So if you think of this alone, you wake up in the morning and you zap into your senses and first just the eyes alone, forget the other senses. Suddenly you're bombarded by shapes and colors. And what happens? There's just a shape and color there. But the next millisecond out of my mouth, what happens is this, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is accessed. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. And out of my mouth comes, oh, that's not a very nice cup. Well, what is that? That's a thought. It's an opinion. It's a viewpoint. And that's how we live our lives. We cognize bare bones sensory objects. And then the next second, we are writing novels about them. Isn't it? And they're usually negative novels. So the negative stories are the delusions. Attachment exaggerates the divineness of that cup. Aversion exaggerates the ugliness of the cup. You know, you hear a sound, your hubby's slurping his coffee in the kitchen, and you hear it, and it's just a sound, but you instantly interpret it. And what's it based on? These are all based on attachment and aversion, and all the branches coming from it. They're the two bare bones ones. So attachment's there all the time, this primordial energy. Okay, sensory consciousness first, and then the rest is mental consciousness, and okay, now that's got two levels of cognition. There's the grosser level, and this is the level we function at, and that's conceptuality. And that includes what we point to here, all our feelings and emotions, and I'll describe. And there are these much subtler levels of mind that we don't even posit in neuroscience and psychology, or even our religions don't. Or we just call it some mysterious kind of subtle spiritual level or something that's very vague. But these genius Indians access that level of mind, you know, and that knowledge is still extant totally in the Buddhist system. And I'm not sure about the Hindus. If they still study it, they must. Maybe some Hindus there. The mind, we've got these subtle levels of mind that we never even access and we don't even posit as existing. But we live at the grossest level, which is conceptuality. The subtle level, the best we can do is just imagine what it's like. It's non-conceptual, beyond the senses, far more profound, far more powerful, far more subtle, and not mystical. It's accessible to any one of us. Just got to go off to the mountains for a couple of years and give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and get single point of concentration, okay? So we live at the level of conceptuality, and that's all. That's it. We live at the grossest level. And it's obviously limited in its capacity for cognition. I mean, it's, conceptual. So conceptual is, then we divide the conceptual into these three categories. We live at that level. There's the negative, neurotic, deluded concepts, some of which are emotional. And why they're emotional, why they're these emotional afflictions, is because we practice them so often that they affect our body. So that's why when we say we're angry, we feel like there's storm inside us, isn't it? And our tragedy in our culture is we don't know we're angry or depressed or jealous or unhappy until our body's shaking. Well, that's a bit like never knowing that your wheels are having a problem until they're falling off on the freeway at 100 miles an hour. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What'll I do? I better go to the mechanic. It's a bit late, okay? And that's our trouble with therapy. We won't go to, if I'm annoyed with my husband slurping, I won't go to my therapist and say, oh, I got a bit upset today. And she'll say, shut up and go home and wait till you want to kill him, then come back. So we don't have, I mean it, but we do not know what's going on in our thoughts, which underpin our feelings until the body is affected, because we're so addicted to our bodies, and we don't pay attention to the mind. That's why even you use the skill of some kind of mindfulness every day. The brilliance of that is you stepping out of your head, or at least trying to for 5 minutes, you can't help but hear the crazy thoughts. And that's the point, not to make them go away. We want to hear them. Now we know what to deal with. And now we can begin to hear them when they're still at the level of conceptual thoughts before they become violent, and your body's shaking. Are we communicating here? And they're all conceptual, because you analyze what attachment is defined as a conceptual thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of something. Aversion or anger is a conceptual thought that exaggerates the ugliness. All the negative states of mind are those. They are conceptual thoughts at their bones. We've practiced them to perfection. That's why they're so emotional. They're automatic now. They're like second nature. Do you understand? We've practiced them to the point where they just come spontaneously. But they're rooted in being conceptual thoughts. And the key thing about the neurotic ones is they distort, they exaggerate. In other words, they're not valid cognitions. Not in a moralistic sense, but in a literal sense. What they're cognizing isn't what's there. Attachment, when it's running your mind and the object is a chocolate cake, attachment causes it to appear divine. We think that, and that's a tragedy, we think the ugliness is in the cup and we think the divineness is in the cake. And we're this innocent victim. It's not my fault. Look at the cake. It's just forcing me to eat it. It's a story made up by our mind, So all the neuroses exaggerate. That's their key function. And that's why they cause us suffering. It's like you've got a $50 note, and for so long you've believed that it's 500. You believe it's 500. You even see 500. And every time you go to spend it, what do you think the result will be? Bitter disappointment. And we've been doing that for eons. And we believe the stories that our mind tells us. They're all conceptual stories in the bones of our being. And when we start to get concentration, then we can start to hear the conceptual thoughts and unpack and unravel them and change them, So attachment is effectively the main one. It drives us. It's emotional. So it's dissatisfaction, therefore emotional hunger. And it's every second. It's not just sometimes it comes. It's there all the time to one degree or another, underpinning everything else, including our goodness. Constantly emotionally hungry, meaning we're not feeling we have enough and not even feeling that I am enough. So it's dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, therefore hankering after something and then manipulating to get it and then exaggerating its deliciousness and then exaggerating its power to give me satisfaction, to make the pain go away, and then bitter disappointment because it's a fantasy. And you start again. That's attachment. And it's possessiveness, manipulation, controlling, and it blinds us. Because the delusions, when they dominate our mind, they blind us from seeing reality. That's their key function, because they're misconceptions. And therefore, they limit our goodness, and therefore they pollute our goodness. And this is why it's so hard to distinguish between attachment and love, for example. Love is a delight that someone be happy. Love is, I want you to be happy. You love your husband, let's say. You want him to be happy. But if there's also attachment there, could be the bare bones direct attachment to him, just his body, let's say, that's pretty straightforward one. But the bigger attachment, they don't even discuss it in the middle scope here. They wait till the bodhisattva path, and this much subtler level of attachment that we've all got, our most primordial attachment, more than sex and drugs and rock and roll, is attachment to be seen as a good girl, to be attached to be approved of, attachment to be validated, attachment to be liked. In other words, the suffering of attachment is so intense that it causes us to think that we're nothing, we're nobody, until someone else says that we're something. That's the deepest one. And then there's the attachment to comfort. That's the grossest one. As long as a comfort zone, mental and physical, because attachment is like fragile. It can't cope with problems. So another kind of major way, a primordial way of describing attachment is it's very fragile and it's frantic. It's like a little junkie, and it's a little child in there that just only ever wants everything to be nice. It can't bear problems. And the moment attachment doesn't get what it wants, that's the beginning of a problem, and that's the beginning of aversion, and therefore anger, or anxiety, or depression, whatever. It's got a whole spectrum, you know. And then we were running between these 1,000 times a day. I think we all recognize. So, of course, in our culture, we just think it's normal behavior. And Buddha says they're mental illnesses, you know, and you can get rid of them, baby. So it's encouraging. Any questions about that? We'll talk more in the weekend, I'm sure. Have to. Yeah, go. So this, in the Lamrim, the main focus is just on attachment to the sensory objects. Calm those down, you know. This is a more subtle level of looking at it. We can see all this. Yes, Robbie.
So the eye's sensory consciousness perceives shape and color.
Yeah.
The mental consciousness, does it perceive cup and then perceive ugly cup?
No, I understand that. So, okay, well, that will be one of there are many things happening in this workshop. A million thoughts arising. So in my mind, first of all, my eyes go there. And because I'm familiar with seeing cups and I haven't lost my memory yet, a billion things will rise. One of them will be definitely cup. That'd probably be the first one. That would be, I mean, you'd see the shape and I'd go, that's cup. But probably instantaneous because the color's more vivid. For me, and this one, the color, okay, it is a cup, but I think because it depends on your mind. But for me, because I'm into color and shape, I think that'd be the one that would dominate. But it would be simultaneous. I mean, all these thoughts are going separately, but it wouldn't be, I don't think the cup would come second. I think that'd be pretty straight away first, I'd think. It's an ugly cup, you know, you'd say cup. Because there I'm also knowing the T's in there, you know, so I'd sort of, but there's many. So this cup would arise, and then you'd recognize clay, you'd recognize round, you'd recognize this one, you'd recognize color, there's a leaf, a million, you'd identify all these different things, you know, all stored in your mind.
But even just the conceptualization of cup,
Yeah.
if it's not including the emptiness of the cup and the dependent arising of the cup, is a diluted idea or an
that's exactly
or an inaccurate perception.
This is a good point. We'll do it when we get to emptiness. The first one, okay. So we've got to, even on a conventional level, we've got to have, there's a valid cognition here. I will have the thought, it is a cup. So conventionally, that is valid. No problem. That is valid. It's a cup. I'd say that's pink. That's a cup. That's valid. That's a leaf. So all the conventions, we would agree that even you could argue, even though if maybe there's a cup competition, you could argue that only it came last. You could even argue from the point of view of design, it's badly designed. You could argue that. I mean, you can argue that even. But still, in general, they are the valid cognitions. It's cup, it's pink, it's a leaf, it's on the table. They're valid cognitions. Of course, they're all driven by not realizing emptiness, but the major mistake is attachment or aversion. The major mistake that distorts all of it is if it's my boyfriend's cup, I'll just fall in love with the cup and I want to sleep with it every day, you know. That's clearly an exaggeration. But that's how we are with all our possessions in our houses, isn't it? So attached to all our possessions, you know. Oh, can't possibly throw that spoon away. I might use it one day, you know. I mean, I always think we're all hoarders. It's just that we're clean hoarders. It's only the dirty hoarders that go on the television. You understand? So conventional, there are some conventions there, but the dominant thing in all of it, I mean, you're seeing your husband, it is a cup of tea, he is slurping, but the opinions, which are the delusions, they're the ones that dominate our lives, that cause the emotional stuff. Do you understand? They're the ones. So you're in real trouble if you think that's a toilet. I mean, it could function as a toilet. Then you've got not even conventional truth. You know, you're up the creek without a paddle there. Do you understand, Robbie? It's true, isn't it? What else, people? But I think this one, I really find it extremely extremely whatever the word is, to distinguish between the sensory and the mental, to notice. Our doorway to the world is the senses. And then our trouble is we assume, this is a tragedy, we assume I'm seeing with my eyeball, one thing, a pretty cup or ugly cup, but the other one is whatever, even when we do realize it is a conceptual story, we believe it isn't coming from my mind. We believe we're seeing, and this is the emptiness one, we believe the ugliness is in the cup. And that's why we suffer. That's why we suffer. So they can, see this, and this is where we have to distinguish between even the virtues and the non-virtues. So you read the latest paper, those 30 children dying in Texas, and all the emotional responses, or the war in Ukraine, or whatever it is that we read about. These are facts. There is a fact. It is a war. There is a fact. 30 children died or whatever. But then we start interpreting it, you know. So if you're a bit of a political fanatic, you're already probably trying to find who to blame in the conspiracy theory and the Texas government and Mr. Trump stopping all the money from FEMA or something. And we're into the bad blaming model, you know. Do you understand? So we get carried away. Or if you've got a lot of compassion, you'll be thinking you'll be using a meditation to help you get more compassion. So it's up to us to decide how to interpret the outside world, that we make it beneficial for us, not just launch into the deluded interpretations. So really the point is in the head, the mental consciousness, we live at the level of interpretations, and we've got to distinguish between the deluded ones and the valid ones. And that's the miracle. That's the real job we're trying to do in the middle scope. You with me, people? And then try and practice having valid cognitions and refrain from the constant berserk ones, you know, because they're the ones that make us crazy. Do you understand, people? I'm sure we're communicating. So this is the essence of so the suffering of change. Okay, let's do a little bit more there. Okay. There's a million things going on in our minds, so many different thoughts and feelings and emotions. So right here, okay, there's attachment. Attachment is emotional hunger. Feel something's missing. Kind of, oh, what's missing? You know, oh, cake, get all excited. And suddenly the next second of attachment is now turned into anticipation. And I think anticipation, looking forward, is one of the delicious parts of attachment. And we spend most of our lives looking forward to something, don't we? Because we're so depressed with what's there. So we start getting fantasy. Oh, look forward to this and look forward to the meal, look forward to that, look forward to anticipate. So now I start to anticipate the chocolate cake. And this is the thing, what's happening is all your bits of mind working. So you got your attachment, which is driving it, not satisfied. Then you start fantasizing the cake, then you get the cake, and then and the goal, of course, with the cake is to get it in here. You don't put it in there and wait for the response. You know where it belongs. So we get the cake in, and all the attachments along right there. So you're using your intention, your concentration, your discrimination, you're doing all the job of getting the cake. You've got your senses working, everything's all doing their bit, and the attachment's running it, and it's waiting, it's anticipating. And it's actually anticipating the cake, but what it's really anticipating is the pleasant feeling. The only reason you want the cake is to get some pleasure. We think it's the cause of the pleasure. So the fact is this one of feeling in the third category, the mechanics of the mind, feeling is there every second. There's either ever a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral. And even this is hard. We can't even distinguish a pleasant feeling from attachment, for example. Attachment's in the negative category, and then pleasant feelings in the neutral. So but all these millions working together. So you're getting the cake. The goal is to get it in the mouth, to experience what we think is the sensory experience of pleasure, because pleasant feeling is sensory and mental, okay, but mainly here it's sensory, isn't it? But mental pleasure can be there. You can look at the car, you know, if it's designed well and made beautifully, you've got all this assessment going on. That's mental. Your eyes are seeing it, but you've got your mental consciousness involved. But the key of this one, the point is this one, to get the pleasure. So you get the cake in the mouth, and this is a tragedy. This is the tragedy. This is why it's called the suffering of change. We're anticipating pleasant feeling. Now, the fact is, pleasant feeling does come. There is a pleasant feeling the moment the cake meets your mouth. We know that. But what happens? Attachment's right there, waiting. It's the emotion. The attachment is the hungry part, the needy bit. You understand, the anticipating. And the moment the cake's in the mouth, feeling comes and it's pleasant, and the attachment says, not enough, Robina. I'm not satisfied. Put another piece in the mouth. And it's downhill from there. That's it, the beginning of the suffering. We know this is true, but it's so depressing because we think, well, excuse me, mate, how am I supposed to get pleasure? We don't know where to turn with this, you know. But Buddha says that you can learn. Okay, the other point is this. As Lama Zopa says, this kind of pleasure, which is mainly the sensory one, so sensory especially, sensory pleasure cannot grow. It can only diminish. This is logic. This is scientific fact. We know the first moment of pleasure is the best. And then the second mouthful, attachment's still hungry. It's not happy yet. And so you put a second mouthful in with even more anticipation. But suddenly the more anticipation and the less pleasure comes. And it gets so distressing. And by the third piece, you want to kill yourself. Because where's the pleasure gone? What is it now? It's changed into the first kind of suffering, stuffed stomach or whatever. Do you understand? This is scientific fact, but it's just painful to hear it. So what's Buddha telling us? He says, I'm so sorry, you people. You think that pleasure, pleasant feelings, are what you get when you get what attachment wants. No. Pleasant feelings are what you get when you give up attachment. And that's mental. But you can also cultivate it sensory. You can learn with mental consciousness to discipline yourself and begin to consciously enjoy the cake. The pleasure's there, and you calm the greedy little attachment down, tell it to shut up. And you try to concentrate. And of course, you've added bodhicitta to it and all those other businesses of offering. That makes it virtuous. That makes it virtuous. And then you can enjoy the pleasure and eat it nicely. And then you can keep your hand in the lap and then keep the pleasure instead of it, you know, and you can make it better, even just in an ordinary sense. Instead of just assuming, keep putting cake in until the pleasure comes. But you know it doesn't. But this is when you're attached to food. This is what we do. We can't stop, you know. And it's just habit more than anything. It's just old broken record habit, isn't it? But this kind of pleasure can't last. Sensory pleasure can only diminish. That's the tragedy. And if we know that, then we have to be disciplined with it. We can see this. I mean, look at all the people on, you know, video, attached to videos, attached to sex, attached to whatever. I mean, look at us, all of us. I remember reading about this girl who would go on Tinder or something, just press a button. I had to go out in the streets and look for boys when I wanted a boy. It was hard work. Go to clubs and look cute and pick them up, seduce them, get them home. Here, you just press a button and you arrange a date. Wow. She said it was very depressing. There she is. She just had sex with this boy and she's getting dressed and she glances over at the bed and there he is on Tinder getting the next date, you know. Or another boy who went to Sex Anonymous, whatever that, you know, do you understand? And he said it was very depressing. He'd be on his 20th girl that day, and as he's on that girl, he's thinking of the next one. But that's what's happening with the cake. As you're having that first mouthful, you're greedily imagining the next one. You can't even enjoy the bit here now because attachment's function, one of them is to leap ahead all the time. Rushing ahead all the time, you know. We're communicating, I'm sure. So Buddha's he's just telling us how the mind works. He's got a bit of knowledge. But to hear that you get happiness by giving up attachment, that's the trick. That's the one, you know. And that's mental happiness. That's satisfaction. That means you will become more satisfied with one piece of cake. Your mind will be less hungry. That's all. That's what it means. Giving up attachment means you'll be less hungry, less emotionally hungry. But you've got to train, and it's the mental consciousness that does the training. The mental consciousness does the training, you know. Do you understand, people? That'll do. We're time to go home. So we got to the second kind of suffering. We'll have to wait for the third one till we get to emptiness, all right? Which is the great scope. Will that do? Food for thought? Okay. So any of this has made any sense? I hope it has. It was helpful for me. Thank you. A few thoughts came clear. Thank you very much. I think it's to understand, just try and get to a level of a little bit of clarity is extremely helpful. Not just hear it as emotional religion, you know, try and understand the logic of it. Try and study the mind, try and go learn, study the mind, go into it more detail. You know, understand the distinction between deluded, virtuous, the mental, the sensory, the way the mind is described so clearly, you know, so helpful. And then the relationship between the external events and the mind and karma, these 4 points, so helpful. Live in your vows, do your purification every day, and you'll have a happy mind. As Lama says, you go to bed with a happy mind. And may compassion grow in the hearts of all, and may all these seeds be planted in this 2 hours. May we nourish them with our practice from the second forward to develop our amazing potential, our potential to be happy. Then the capacity to help others. Us first. Has to be. Don't feel selfish. Changchub semchog rinpoche, ma kie panam ke gyuchig, kie pan yampa me pa yang, gong ne gong du pa ba shok, ke wadi nyudu dag, lama sange drub gyo ne, drowa chikyang malupa, dei salaga pa shok. And may His Holiness Dalai Lama live another 20, 30 years like he's promised us. And may they've got to go at search party for Lama Zopa, a little Nepali boy. They've got to look around for Nepali boys up in the mountains. A friend of mine had a dream, 7th of June. She woke up in this vivid dream. She was in the mountains, in this very beautiful in the mountains in Nepal, she felt. She was blowing a human trumpet. And instead of blowing it, she was saying, Om Tata Om Gate Gate Pada Gate Parasam Gate Bodhi Svaha. And the second time she blew, at the last syllable, she instead of saying Bodhi Svaha, she said Lama Zopa. And she woke up and she said, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has been reborn. And she thought it was a good point and she went back to sleep. She looked at the clock, it was 7 minutes past midnight. So let's find out, let's see if it's true. Felt very nice. So we hope he comes back soon. And we keep living too, as long as we can, be used to this world, okay? Thank you, people.
Yeah, thank you.
So what's today, Wednesday?
Yeah,
Tuesday, Wednesday?
today's Wednesday.
Okay, then I'll see you Friday.
Yes, so Friday starts our weekend workshop on the 6 perfections. Good night, everybody online. Thanks for coming. We'll see you Friday, hopefully.
Thank you.